Meet me. All right. So you guys know I don't normally do this, but everyone keeps messaging me on Discord asking me about my thoughts on ML Krau. So we're gonna boot up this introduction video for ML Krau, and I'm gonna give you my first thoughts on them. Now, compared to other Epic 7 content creators out there, I'm not really. I don't really get on the hype train usually unless I think a hero is really good. And I'll just say this right off the bat. I think we have to see his multipliers before we know if he's busted or not. Depending on the multipliers, he might be a must pull. But I think it's far too early to say because I feel like a lot of YouTubers are acting like his S3 is going to hit like a Water Krau Siegfried. It's not. If it does, this is the most broken hero in the game. I highly doubt it will do that much damage. So let's go over his abilities and kind of stats from this video. So he has a crit chance imprint for the team, and I believe he has a health imprint for himself. So both imprints are really solid. And the thing about ML Krau is he's going to be very easy to build, right? Because he has no debuffs on any of his skills. So really all you need is health, defense, speed, and for RTA effect resist. Every other stat is pretty much completely irrelevant because his moves all have HP scaling. And if you guys are familiar with heroes like Alencia and stuff, HP scaling is very powerful. Obviously, his artwork's pretty cool, although it's kind of weird because I guess Epic 7 is going into the future now, and we have like futuristic robots and stuff or whatever. So I think that's kind of weird from like a continuity perspective because how are people with like swords and magic supposed to beat futuristic magic robot people? But whatever. So here are his stats. He does have a self-health imprint and a crit chance imprint. It's really high. If you get him triple S, that's a lot of stats you can save on teammates you pair him with. And his base stats are pretty solid. Let's talk about the S3 that everyone is going. So I'm going to discuss the skills and then go over my general impressions afterwards. So his S3, it summons Siegfried and attacks all enemies, and it grants immunity to all allies for 2 turns. The important thing here is it penetrates defense, and I think that tells us a few things. Penetrates defense but cannot trigger critical hit. Damage dealt increases proportional to max health as expected, and damage dealt increases every time this skill is used and can stack up to 3 times. Now I want to talk about this part and what it means. Typically, moves that have penetrate defense either have some kind of difficult to meet condition, like Dark Corvus having to wait 9 turns, or Krau having to be at low health, or I guess a Watcher Shuri is the simplest condition, but he's very squishy, and then Spez needs to have the target be stunned. Here there is no condition, and it's kind of like Blood Moon Haste. When there's no condition and it penetrates defense, what that tells me is that the damage mods overall are probably going to be pretty low. And for good reason. Again, I said that he's going to be very easy to build, right? Because he doesn't really need a lot of other, like he doesn't care about crit damage, crit chance, attack, effectiveness, any of that. So he's going to be very easy to build. If this move actually had high multipliers, think of how broken this hero is if he can just open up the match and hit the entire team for like 12, 13k and penetrate defense. That would be so freaking busted. And if that's the case, it would almost be a reason not to pull for him because I guarantee you he's going to be nerfed shortly there. Actually, I will pull for him because I'll nerf him and then give me a selector. But this move cannot possibly dunk people because if it does, it'd be way too broken. Remember, it attacks all enemies. It's not just like one person. So if it does like 10k damage and hits the entire team and actually hits for like 10k plus, this will be the most broken move in the game. So my best guess is if you get him to like 25k HP or something, it'll probably hit for like 5 or 6, which is still pretty solid, but nothing mind-blowing. Like, you're not going to be cleaving people with this thing. At least I hope not, otherwise it's going to be busted. Now I'm curious to see how much the damage goes up when it stacks, because every time you use it up to 3 times, it does get stronger over time. I'm thinking maybe at 3 stacks and good HP stats, maybe it'll hit for like 8 or 9k, which will still be pretty busted because, you know, in RTA with like a battle frenzy, everyone's life is going to get lower. So eventually, this is going to mean that he can nearly one-shot the enemy team if he can survive that long. So just for that reason alone, even if it doesn't do insane damage, LR Krau might still be pretty busted because you could just tank him up and do some troll like double Soul Weaver, double Night Comp, and just tank up, and we'll discuss his S2 soon, and then just wipe them all out with the S3. And the fact that he grants immunity to all allies is also a big perk. People are going to say, oh, they're going to bring Basar. Well, it's RTA, just ban Basar, and it's not an issue. So this S3 is obviously, no matter what the damage mods are, I think it's going to be really good. But I just want to dispel the notion that it's going to be like one-shotting teams right away. I highly doubt it, guys. That would be so freaking busted, and I don't want to hype you guys up into thinking it's going to lead to like Oxlot's LR Krau where he opens with a $20,000 AOE horse. It's just not going to happen. Alright, so the animation itself is pretty cool. Let's talk about his S2, and I think this is going to kind of speak a little bit to how I think a lot of people will use him, and these are just my predictions. I could be completely wrong. So his S2, after suffering an attack that targets all allies, decreases the caster's skill cooldown by 1 turn, so it's kind of like DC-ish, and then it grants a barrier to all allies for 1 turn. And it only has a 1-turn cooldown, and the barrier strength increases proportional to his max health. I'm curious to see how thick this barrier is, but this skill is, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's amazing. So basically, the way I see it, every single turn, he's going to give the entire team an FCC-style initial barrier if they get hit by an AoE. So against certain teams, he's going to be really busted. So I'm going to talk about this skill more later, but let's just go over his S1 real quick because that's going to be his most basic move. Let's just go here. Actually, this video is kind of telling because if you look at it, the barrier isn't too thick, which makes sense because if it was too thick, it'd be broken. Punishment attacks the enemy with a sword storm before increasing speed for 1 turn. Pretty basic. I think the biggest thing to note here is that there's no debuffs on this skill. So again, he needs literally no effectiveness. Like even things like FCC, some people like to put effectiveness on her. You don't even have to worry about that with ML Krau. But his S1, I don't think there's much to talk about. I think the design is just to give him speed buff so he turn cycles faster, to let him put up his barrier and use his S3 more often. So here are my predictions for how this hero is going to work and impact the meta based on his S3 and S2. And a lot of this is predicated on what we find out about the damage modifiers. Now, again, my impression is that the damage modifier on his S3 is going to be pretty low, but it could still be used. So here are my 2 predictions. Number 1, it's used on a stall comp to survive until Battle Frenzy amps up to the point that his 3-stacked S3 can one-shot or close to one-shot the entire opposing team. That's one option, and that will entirely depend on how high the modifier is for his S3. I'm assuming at 3 stacks, even with pretty bad modifiers, he should be able to hit for like 7, 8, 9k, which if you've done RTA matches that went a long time, you'll know everyone's life goes below that. So if he can tank up and survive that, he can potentially just stall until he one-shots the other team. The other option is, and I think this might be the more common option, is that he is a good answer to kind of the debuff heavy meta in high champion, high legend, where some people really like to draft a bunch of heroes and play lockdown comps, where they basically have a bunch of weak hitting heroes, but they deny you every turn. So think something like Fire Tenebria with ML Roman and Athletica, and these comps that don't really do a whole lot of damage, but they just lock you down and wear you down. And against those kind of teams, I think LR Krau will be a very scary pick, and they might even first ban him because his S3 gives the whole team immunity, right? And it does penetrate defense and it won't hit hard, but against those kind of debuff heavy comps, those are usually not tanky heroes. So if he gets like one or two of these off, it might take one of them out and really ruin their lockdown strategy. And also his S2. It's always putting up a barrier on every AoE attack, right? And the thing with these lockdown comps is they typically don't do a lot of damage. They just do a lot of small amounts of damage consistently while denying you turns. Now, with something like LR Krau, if he's constantly putting up barriers, and we already saw from this clip that the barrier is not that thick, but it's probably enough to block something like a Dizzy S1 or a full effectiveness Tenebria S2 or something. It will be enough to mitigate a lot of damage and prevent them from completely locking you down until you can get a turn and do something to break out of it. So I think that he's going to be really strong against debuff heavy comps. And he's a very solid pick in there with his AoE immunity, his consistent AoE ignore defense damage, and the fact that he's putting up barriers every turn. The thing that I think he's not going to be good in very much is straight bruiser matches where they bring like a lot of single target bruisers like Alencia or LQ Charlotte, because this guy is very susceptible to being ignored, right? Because if you just ignore him, his S3 is a 7-turn cooldown. His S1 really doesn't do anything, no debuffs, it just gives him a little speed buff. And his S2 will never ever proc. I mean, against something like SSB, it'll probably be pretty powerful. But if you just go, like, let's imagine a team like DN, Alencia, LQ Charlotte, and like Krau or something. ML Krau will just sit there and do absolutely nothing. But against debuff heavy comps, and depending on the multiplier of his S3, if you just want to stall and try to go for a Battle Frenzy one-shot, I think he'll be really powerful. So I guess the conclusion here is he a must pull? Let's wait and see the multipliers before we say that. If the multipliers are good and I'm completely wrong and we figure out at 3 stacks and 30k HP, his S3 hits the entire enemy team for 20k, yeah, it's a must pull. That is so broken. So broken. Must pull. But if we find out at 30k HP and 3 stacks it hits for like 8, 9k, I don't think it's a must pull, but I think he's still a welcome addition to your kit. But if you're F2P or something, you can't pull on everything, maybe not, right? Because for something like, right now it's a DC banner. For something like Guild Wars and Arena Offense, DC is a guaranteed win. So it makes certain kind of content like super trivial. So DC will completely make you win every single Guild Wars and Arena Offense match. Last Rider Krau, if his S3 multiplier isn't insane, is going to be a very, very strong, solid pocket pick, but he's not going to single-handedly carry you through any one kind of content. He's going to excel in certain kinds of situations and not be very useful in others. So me saying he's a must pick is hard right now without knowing those multipliers, but again, my best guess is that those multipliers will not be insane, and feel free to come back to this video and laugh at me if I turn out to be wrong. But this thing right here where it says penetrate defense, I can't imagine the multipliers are high, because if it is, it's going to be so busted. And remember when the Epic 7 team play tests these heroes, they have all the heroes and they're giving them like max rolled equipment when they're trying to balance it. So if they're really trying to make this hit for like 15, 20k at high stats, this is going to be so busted that it's just not realistic. So anyways, hopefully you guys don't need to message me on Discord anymore. This is my first thoughts on LR Krau. If you have any questions or want to debate me, put it in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. Till next time.